right, and welcome back to our next chapter of Roald Dahl's Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator. We are now on chapter 3, The Link Up. Inside the Great Glass Elevator, there was also a great deal of excitement. Charlie and Mr. Wonka and all the others could see clearly the huge silvery shape of Space Hotel USA about a mile ahead of them, and behind them was the smaller, but still pretty enormous, commuter capsule. The great glass elevator, not looking at all great now besides these two monsters, was in the middle. And of course, everybody, even Grandma Josephine, knew very well what was going on. They even knew that the three astronauts in charge of the commuter capsule were called Shuckworth, Shanks, and Showler. The whole world knew about these things. Newspapers and television had been shouting about almost nothing else for the past 6 months. Operation Space Hotel was the event of the century. "What a load of luck!" cried Mr. Wonka. "We've landed ourselves slap in the middle of the biggest space operation of all time." "We've landed ourselves in the middle of a nasty mess," said Grandma Josephine. "Turn back at once." "No, Grandma," said Charlie. "We've got to watch it now. We must see the commuter capsule linking up with the Space Hotel." Mr. Wonka floated right up close to Charlie. "Let's beat them to it, Charlie," he whispered. "Let's get there first and go aboard the Space Hotel ourselves." Charlie gaped, and then he gulped, and then he said softly, "It's impossible. We've got to have all sorts of special gadgets to link up with another spacecraft, Mr. Wonka." "Oh, my elevator could link up with a crocodile if it had to," said Mr. Wonka. "Just leave it to me, my boy." "Grandpa Joe!" cried Charlie. "Did you hear that? We're going to link up with the Space Hotel and go on aboard." "Yippee!" shouted Grandpa Joe. "What a brilliant thought, sir! What a staggering idea!" He grabbed Mr. Wonka's hand and started shaking it like a thermometer. "Oh, be quiet, you balmy old bat," said Grandma Josephine. "We're in a hot enough stew already. I want to go home." "Me too," said Grandma Georgina. "What if they come after us?" said Mr. Bucket, speaking for the first time. "What if they capture us?" said Mrs. Bucket. "What if they shoot us?" said Grandma Georgina. "Oh, what if my beard were made of green spinach?" said Mr. Wonka. "Bumcum and tummy rot. You'll never get anywhere if you go about what if and everything like that. Would Columbus have discovered America if he'd said, 'What if I sink on the way over? What if I meet pirates? What if I never come back?' He wouldn't have even started. We want no what-ifers around here. Right, Charlie? Off we go then. But wait. This is a very tricky maneuver, and I'm going to need help. We have to press lots of buttons, all in different parts of the elevator. I shall take these two over there, the white and the black." Mr. Wonka made a funny blowing noise with his mouth and glided effortlessly, just like a huge bird, across the elevator to the white and black buttons. And there he hovered. "Grandpa Joe, sir, kindly station yourself beside that silver button there. Yes, that's the one. And you, Charlie, go up, stay floating beside that little gold button near the ceiling. I must tell you that each of these buttons fires booster rockets from different places outside the elevator. That's how we change directions. Grandpa Joe's rocket turns us to starboard to the right. Charlie's turns us to port to the left. Mine makes us go higher or lower or faster or slower. Y'all ready?" "No, wait," said Charlie, who was floating exactly midway between the floor and the ceiling. "How do I get up? I can't get up to the ceiling." He was thrashing his arms and legs violently like a drowning swimmer, but getting nowhere. Here's a picture. "Oh, my dear boy," said Mr. Wonka, "you can't swim in this stuff. It isn't water, you know. It's air, and very thin air at that. There's nothing to push against. So you have to use jet propulsion. Watch me. You take a deep breath, and then you make a small round hole in your mouth, and then you blow as hard as you can. You blow downward, and you jet yourself up. If you blow left, you shoot off to the right, and so on. You maneuver yourself like a spacecraft, but using your mouth as a booster rocket." Suddenly, everyone began practicing this business of flying about, and the whole elevator was filled with the blowings and snortings of the passengers. Grandma Georgina, in her red flannel nightgown, with two skinny bare legs sticking out of the bottom, was trumpeting and spitting like a rhinoceros, flying from one side of the elevator to the other, shouting, "Out of my way! Out of my way!" and crashing into poor Mr. and Mrs. Bucket with terrible speed. Grandpa George and Grandma Josephine were doing the same. And well, may you wonder what the millions of people down on Earth were thinking as they watched these crazy happenings on their television screens. You must realize they couldn't see things very clearly. The great glass elevator was only about the size of a grapefruit on their screens, and the people inside, slightly blurred through the glass, were no bigger than the pits of a grapefruit. So, even so, the watchers below could see them buzzing about wildly like insects in a glass box. "What in the world are they doing?" shouted the President of the United States, staring at the screen. "Looks like some sort of war dance, Mr. President," answered Astronaut Schowler over the radio. "You mean they're Indians?" said the President. "I didn't say that, sir." "Oh, yes, you did, Schowler." "No, I didn't, Mr. President." "Silence!" said the President. "You're muddling me up." Back in the elevator, Mr. Wonka was saying, "Please, please do stop flying about. Keep still, everybody, so we can get on with the docking." "Oh, you miserable old mackerel," said Grandma Georgina, sailing past him. "Just when we start having a bit of fun, you want to stop it." "Oh, look at me, everybody!" shouted Grandma Josephine. "I'm flying. I'm like a golden eagle." "I can fly faster than any of you," cried Grandpa George, whizzing around and around, his nightgown billowing out beside him like a tail of a parrot. "Grandpa George," cried Charlie, "please calm down. If we don't hurry, those astronauts will get there before us. Don't you want to see the inside of the Space Hotel? Any of you?" "Out of my way!" shouted Grandma Georgina, blowing herself back and forth. "I'm a jumbo jet." "You're a balmy old bat," said Mr. Wonka. In the end, the old people grew tired and out of breath, and everyone settled quietly into a floating position. "All set, Charlie and Grandpa Joe, sir?" said Mr. Wonka. "All set, Mr. Wonka," Charlie answered, hovering near the ceiling. "I'll give the order," said Mr. Wonka. "I'm the pilot. Do not fire your rockets until I tell you. And don't forget who is who. Charlie, your port. Grandpa Joe, your starboard." Mr. Wonka pressed one of his own two buttons, and immediately the booster rockets began firing underneath the great glass elevator. The elevator leaped forward, but swerved violently to the right. "Hard a port!" yelled Mr. Wonka. Charlie pressed his button. His rockets fired. The elevator swung back into line. "Steady as you go!" cried Mr. Wonka. "Starboard, 10 degrees. Steady, steady. Keep her there." As you can see, tiny. Soon they were hovering directly underneath the tail of the enormous silvery space hotel. "You see that little square door with the bolts on it?" said Mr. Wonka. "That's the docking entrance. It won't be long now. Port a fraction. Steady. Starboard a bit. Good, good. Easy does it. We're nearly there." To Charlie, it felt rather as though he were in a tiny rowboat underneath the stern of the biggest ship in the world. The Space Hotel towered over them. It was enormous. "I can't wait," thought Charlie, "to get inside and to see what it's like." Stay tuned for our next chapter. See you soon.